Guys who married Bridezillas. What happened after the wedding? Story 1. My cousin was married to one. He comes from a very not wealthy area and has become successful himself after moving out of his hometown. His wife was extremely wealthy, even could say excessively. They married after a year of knowing each other, and boy was it a surprise to hear about the wedding plans. They spent over $250,000 on the wedding, including catering by 5 to 7 different restaurants. Their food was from different cultures and cooked in front of you. Think almost hibachi buffet style. They even had servers in tailed suits and white gloves serving Taco Bell after midnight once everyone was drunk. Once they got married, she was spending more money than he could make. She was getting mad because he wasn't making enough while she wasn't working, and they hadn't had kids. They got divorced, and she gave him the ultimatum of getting his ring back or keeping the dog. He kept the dog. Her sister, a lawyer, helped her file a restraining order on him, and they haven't spoken since. Screw her. But man, did he dodge a bullet. Story 2. They had an expensive $75,000 wedding. Afterwards, they split, and it turned out the bride never turned in the paperwork to make their marriage legal. The groom didn't even know he wasn't married until he wanted to file for a divorce. The bride never returned the gifts either, even though they never even got married. She just lied to everyone about it. I don't know how many people know she never got married. Story 3. Married a groomzilla. We're talking costume changes between the wedding and reception, yelling at the wedding planner, dragged out all-night fights about whether we can add fruit kebabs so people would maybe get enough to eat and all that. There was zero compromise. He made a lot of promises for things I'd been wanting after the wedding, and they never materialized, like a beach vacation and such. Turns out no compromise at the wedding meant no compromise anywhere else, so I left him after 4 years of marriage. Best decision ever. Story 4. First wife was a bridezilla. During the honeymoon, she realized she was married and the wedding day was history. She wanted the big wedding, which she had, not the marriage. The next 2 years were hell until she finally tapped out. I was young and stupid and the thought of divorce never crossed my mind. I don't know why it didn't. I guess I just assumed I'd be miserable the rest of my life. When she told me she was leaving, it felt as if the weight of the world was off of my shoulders. On a happy note, her parents were still paying off the wedding when we divorced. That's what happens when you allow your daughter everything she wanted, including 2 wedding dresses. Story 5. My girlfriend of 10 years is very down-to-earth and level-headed. We finally decided to get married later this year for a few reasons, and she's feeling a lot of phantom pressure to do things a certain way. It's not like there is an overbearing mom or catty friends applying pressure or expectations. It's just the whole idea is overwhelming and filled to the brim with opportunities to make a decision you might end up regretting later. I've taken a more active role in narrowing down options instead of asking her to pick a perfect solution out of the thousands of possible options. It's helped somewhat, but there is still a lot of pressure on her, seemingly out of nowhere, to make a series of decisions that all depend upon the first few big decisions that are weighing heavily on us. All this to say, I can see how this kind of stuff could turn a normal woman into a lunatic. These types of events tend to bring latent family and friend drama to the forefront, and emotions are high before anything even really gets started. My guess is that a lot of the bridezillas were actually lovely people who calm down and return to being lovely people after the stress of the wedding stuff is removed. Story 6. I married a groomzilla, bent over backwards to make the wedding as magical as he wanted. I would have been happy in someone's backyard with a potluck. He admitted in couples counseling 7 years later that he never really wanted to marry me so much as he wanted a huge show and party. Everyone liked and approved of me, so he wanted them all to see he was making a good choice and be envious. He wanted them to be proud of him. We used up most of the money I got from a car accident settlement. Could have put in a down payment on a small house. He asked for a divorce in 2020. Story 7. My brother married a bridezilla. She yelled at my mother the day of for asking her where she wanted certain decorations at the reception site. There wasn't a written plan, so my mom had nothing to go off of. Never thanked my parents for financially contributing to the wedding. Accused a bridesmaid of trying to upstage her by getting a spray tan before the wedding. My brother wanted me to be in the wedding party, but she told him to his face that I was too pretty to be in the wedding party, and all of her bridesmaids had to be less attractive than her. stole my sister-in-law's jacket in the middle of the reception, literally took it right off her back just because one of the bridesmaids was cold. It was a night reception in the spring. The girl should have brought a jacket. The list goes on. Well, they got divorced about a year later because apparently her demanding attitude carried over into the marriage. Needless to say, the rest of my family had a little party when we heard about the divorce. Story 8. A coworker of mine married a bridezilla. I'll try to just hit the bullet points of what happened leading up to, during, and after the wedding, but it's still a lot. The moment he proposed, she essentially lost her passion for intimacy. According to him, she also basically stopped acting like the woman that he fell in love with and started acting like her real self, which was completely crazy. A week after he proposed, she quit her job because her full-time job was now planning the wedding. The wedding was horrible, but I'm getting there. She had a fight with his mother because she demanded the groom's mom pay for half the wedding, but get zero input and wasn't allowed to contribute to the guest list, which was 95% the bride's friends and family. The bride, who was 30 years old, subsequently egged her future mother-in-law's house. When the bride and groom had a spat about the egging, he went to work the next day, and she shaved her head and sent him a video of her screaming and sobbing as she buzzed her hair off in the bathroom. I worked with him, and he showed me the video when he said he had to leave, and I strongly urged him to have her assessed by a psychiatrist. He made a dumb joke about intimacy with a crazy girl is the best kind, and I pitied him. The wedding itself was in a pool clubhouse in the summer. It was way too small for the 150-plus people that were invited. Someone forgot to turn the AC on until after the place was packed. A lifeguard showed up in a swimsuit to turn it on, but it did little given it was already sweltering. 2 rows of chairs in the clubhouse were ribboned off with reserved signs on them, so no one sat in them. They were later occupied by the 6 seated bridesmaids, leaving about a dozen vacant chairs once the wedding started. The one groomsman stood by the groom and didn't sit. Elderly people were left standing or reduced to sitting on the floor, as there was no way to get to the chairs once the ceremony started. The bride showed up 90 minutes late, having been unhappy with her hair, which I could only assume was a wig, and makeup. So she took it all off and did it herself. So all the guests are standing for an hour and a half waiting for her. The groom was literally standing at the altar, sweating his butt off in a wool suit in the South's high summer, and was clearly not sure if she would show up. He looked like he felt sick. When the bride showed up, she burst into the clubhouse, marched down the aisle, and snapped at the officiant to hurry up and get started. During the prayer, while the religious groom had his head bowed, she turned to wave at everyone. I don't pray, so I was looking up. Then she told her mother to go get her some water. She drank a bottle of water during the prayer and kept grinning and waving at people in attendance, paying zero attention to her groom in front of her. When the ceremony was over, tables were crammed into the clubhouse, and apparently only family and immediate friends of the bride had seats at tables. The rest of us were going to be standing outside during the reception, so I didn't see a dance, a speech, the cake cut, nothing. The food was served outside, in the southern U.S. July heat with bugs everywhere. The bride made the groom go get her food over and over. He meekly stood in line with the other 150 people until people insisted he go sit and let them get food. Nope, she told him to get food, so he said he had to be the one to get her food. She never left her table and never greeted any of her guests. Apparently, they had a massive fight as they were leaving the following day for the honeymoon, the bride laying all the failures of the wedding she planned at him and his mom's feet. She threw his luggage out of the car and tried to drive to the airport by herself, but he had their tickets and jumped on the hood to stop her from driving off in his car. He got fired about a month after the wedding because he kept showing up late, leaving early, and leaving in the middle of the day, usually because she called him with some crisis. 1 year after the wedding, I got a thank you note for my wedding gift, which was signed by just the bride, with a note that said, "As you may have heard, Ryan and I have had a bumpy start in our first year as a married couple, and we're separated now. Thanks for the lovely gift." They divorced a couple of months later. Story 9. Not a bridezilla, but a groomzilla. A friend of my father was remarrying. It was both his and the bride's second time around, both in their early 40s, and an arranged marriage. The guy was an utter groomzilla. He demanded that every event be at top-notch hotels with obscenely expensive catering and hired string quartets and whatnot for the entertainment. Mostly paid out of the bride's family's pocket, I might add. The parties on the nights leading up to the main wedding event were opportunity enough for him to make a rather public mockery of himself, talking at the top of his voice and showboating the entire time. But the kicker came the next day, when the bride was missing from her own wedding's reception. Obviously, it was very odd and conspicuous, and the few relatives from her side made some non-committal excuses about her not feeling well, etc. Turns out, this dirtbag had divorced the poor woman right after he'd had his wedding night fun. He said that he didn't like her enough. And that's an almost literal quote. So he gave her the divorce papers, and that was it. The marriage was officially over before the festivities even ended. Story 10. My husband's friend that he's known since they were kids. So I think about almost 20 years of friendship, married a Bridezilla. She is evangelical and religion is pretty much her life, and he was agnostic. A nice metalhead geek guy. They asked us to be the best man and woman. Me and my husband are both tattooed, and when we arrived at the wedding, we were his only friends. Everyone at that big wedding was from her church. Well, the preacher kept saying to him he had his old life and now his new life. His old friends and now the new friends, yada yada. But all the time criticizing his old ways, the authentic way. And everyone kept looking at me and my hubby like we were beasts. Worst day ever. She is that kind of person that wants to be an influencer. Every single thing is on her Instagram. Their relationship seems perfect there, but he always seems so unhappy, so apathetic, especially when we used to see him, before the pandemic. Always talking about how they are so different, how things are like she wants. Her stories are basically her saying he does nothing right. It's even humiliating. She made him stop talking to us. And this last week, he got out of every group we had. He stopped answering my husband, who is very sad that he's lost one of his friends. I believe she is the only one replying to the few weird messages he gets. That's the Bridezilla. It seems to be really usual for the Bridezilla to act up on social media, but in real life, it is all messy. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on a new video.